Welcome to another segment of the Business of Aesthetics podcast. I'm Michael Walker, your host for this episode. Before we get started, I want to thank all of our incredible listeners from the United States, Canada, and around the globe. We couldn't do this without your continuous support. A special thank you also goes out to our sponsor for this episode, Equa Marketing. With 20 years of experience, Equa Marketing is a leader in digital marketing services for aesthetic practices. As part of this podcast, they are offering our listeners a complimentary digital marketing consultation, which will include a tailor-made 12-month digital strategy for your practice. A little later on, you'll be able to head over to businessofesthetics, all one word, .org/MSM to book your consultation. I'll have more details on the opportunity and how you can go ahead and connect a little later in the podcast. So without further delay, let's dive into our theme for today, Shaping the Future of Aesthetic Nursing, Training, Safety, and Industry Standards with Tracy Hotta. Tracy, it is great to have you with us today.
Thank you, Michael.
Well, let me share a little bit of your background with our listeners. Tracy is an industry leader in aesthetic nursing, training, and patient safety standards. With nearly 3 decades of experience, Tracy has played a pivotal role in shaping the field of medical aesthetics, advocating for higher education, safety protocols, and professional excellence. Tracy began her career in plastic surgery and aesthetic medicine, working alongside some of the most respected professionals in the field. Over the years, she has trained and mentored countless aesthetic injectors, ensuring they uphold the highest standards of patient care and treatment safety. She's also the founder of THMA Consulting, an esteemed training program designed to equip new and experienced injectors with the skills needed to deliver safe and effective aesthetic treatments. Beyond training, Tracy has been deeply involved in developing safety guidelines and best practices for the industry. She has worked extensively with professional organizations to establish standards that protect both patients and practitioners, ensuring aesthetic medicine continues to evolve responsibly. In today's episode, we'll talk and discuss the evolution of aesthetic nursing, the importance of advancing training, patient and safety protocols, and the future of the industry. Tracy, as I said, it's great to have you here. And I'm going to, let's start with your journey. First of all, I always love to kind of just know a little bit what got you excited. What inspired you to transition from clinical practice to training and advocacy for aesthetic nurses?
Well, thank you for that great introduction. I guess a little bit of history on myself. I was 9 years old when I decided I wanted to be a nurse, and my father was a general practitioner in Moncton, New Brunswick. And at the age of 9, I would go over on weekends and I would help his nurse, put patients into the rooms and things like that. And her name was Alice, and she was such an inspiration because she was confident, she was well organized. My dad respected her immensely. The patients respected her. She respected the patients. And she had such a passion for patients and for nursing. And I thought, I want to be an Alice. So then I decided that this was going to be my career path. If somebody asked me, 30 years ago, would this be where I was? I would say definitely not. I sort of pictured myself working in the hospital and going into management and not even dreaming about being an entrepreneurial nursing. So I moved to Ontario and with 3 years of nursing and with OR and operating room nursing or ER and operating room, and was working at in the operating room at Scarborough General Hospital. And a plastic surgeon was opening up one of the first out-of-hospital premise operating rooms. So this was a whole new concept. This was back in 1990. So I was 28 years old, new young nurse, thinking I've got the world by the tail. And he asked me to run the practice. So I kind of like to be challenged a little bit. So this was definitely a challenge. I felt since I had ER and OR experience that this would be something that I could do. I just had no managerial experience. So I had to kind of learn that on my own. And it was more, how do I develop policies and procedures and, staffing? And we had to do accreditation. You're out of the hospital. So I had to set up accreditation to make sure that we met all the safety standards. So it was quite a challenge. Going along, about 2 years into that, the sales rep was over in Europe and came back, and we had already started to do dermal fillers. So the plastic surgeon was doing dermal fillers in the practice. And she came back from Europe and she goes, "Oh my God, Tracy, all the nurses are injecting over there." And I was like, "Really?" And she said, "Yeah, we have to do that here." So faced with another challenge that I was like, okay, I think I can do this. And they had already started doing dermal filler injections out west under Kent Remington and Alistair Crothers. So there was a couple of colleagues that I didn't know then, but I know now. So it was like, okay, well, how do we go about doing it? Because the plastic surgery meetings would not allow nurses into the meetings to learn about dermal fillers. So we had to kind of learn it on our own. So we got information from Europe. They already had a training type program over there. So it was, took me about 1.5 years to convince my physician that, yes, this is something that nurses can do. Yes, patients will come to us to have it done, even though nurses weren't seen in that independent practice at that point. But how do we go about training? Because there was no training aspect. So then decided to set up a training program to train the nurses. So this would have been back in 1996. So, got all the information from Europe because, again, we had nothing here. There weren't even clinical articles that we had access to. So set up a training program, which was great. So workbook, tests, PowerPoint, doing live presentations or live injections. Sort of went along with that for about 5 or 6 years. And I seem to get bored every 5 or 6 years. So then I'm like, The company asked to buy my training program to submit to the FDA for approval for Juvederm. So I'm like, yeah, no, you buy it. That's fine. Got out of teaching and then focused on my own practice. So enhancing my clinical skills. Then I got involved with a nursing organization down through the US, which is IceBand. Really started to do presentations and got involved with their board. Became the first Canadian president of IceBand, which is the US voice for aesthetic nurses. Learned a ton from that. So brought all that knowledge back on strategic planning and opened up CSASN. So that was the sister of IceBand in the States. So that was in 2009 that we started CSASN, which is now the Canadian voice of aesthetics in Canada. Viable organization, still going strong and improving, at great strides. Through that organization, we decided that we needed to set standards and guidelines because there was nothing out there really to guideline patients or nurses. And the provincial colleges didn't know either because this was all new. What's this that nurses are, it's a self-pay. Nurses are used to being paid by, through the hospitals or institutions. So took about 2 years to develop them, and there was a task force. So I think there was 12 of us on this task force that we came out in 2016, came out with the practice standards and guidelines for Canada, sent them to the provincial college nursing colleges, got their input on it and standardized it. And then that has been updated every 4 years. So they just came out with the revised standards and guidelines in 2024. So instrumental. That was a huge thing that I wanted to do. That was one of my big goals. And then in 2016, I had a nurse practitioner that took a training program and felt that she did not get the required knowledge, evidence-based knowledge from the training program to proceed with injecting. So she looked me up. She said, "Can I just shadow you for a couple of months just to get a sense and everything?" And I'm like, "Sure, come on in." I'm very open door. So she came in, and after months, she said, you have to start a training program. And I'm like, been there, done that, don't have to do that again. And she said, no, you have to. So we identified the gaps that were from the training program that she took, mainly facial anatomy. There was textbook anatomy, but not facial anatomy according to injections. So that was a huge component that we built into the program. And there was no business component to pretty much any of the training programs back then, which I think is kind of more important in a way that you want to know the why you're injecting, not just how to inject. Here's the needle, put 5 units in this muscle. You really want to know the why. So we built a whole 3-hour business component to it with business ethics and professional standards and scope of practice and consents and things like that, which I think was instrumental in pushing our training company forward because we were looking at it from a different perspective, which is all based on patient safety. And then it was kind of then that I realized that this is what I want to do. I want to educate, and there's so much that can be done out there. So I hung up my needle after 32 years of injecting. I hung up my needle in 2023, moved to Halifax, and just concentrate on the training company, which was established in 2016. So we're in our 9th year, and it's been, I know now that this is what I wanted to do. This is what I was meant to do, was to be a patient advocate and an advocate for the nurses in aesthetic medicine. So there.
That is, so from 9 years old to what, maybe 40 years old now, right? We'll go with that number, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, a few years.
Yeah, I apologize if I overstated. So I hear innovator, benchmarker, advocate, and just plain old curiosity. And I think that you said something that I think is so important. It's not just about injecting, or I'm not in your field, but I am an artist in the context of what I do as a leadership coach, a mediator with words, and I always have to have a vision of what it is I'm trying to achieve. What is really the desired outcome here? What do I want my story to be, their story to be in a year from now? Whatever that looks like. And I think that's so important what you're sharing. But you need the foundation. I never thought of facial anatomy as a standalone thing. It says that makes total sense. And I would really want if I'm having an injection, I really want my person to know that. I can get that. And I love how you fill the gap but you have found your passion. And I know as a result, you created THMA Consulting, and you've built a strong reputation for training new injectors. Obviously, that's part of what you do. And if you're listening to this podcast, we'll have the way you can reach out to Tracy at the end of the podcast. So you don't worry, you'll be able to connect with her and ask more detailed questions than we're digging into today. But you build a strong reputation for training new injectors. So what sets your training approach apart? And how do you ensure high standards in aesthetics education? It's one thing to say it, but go ahead and prove it.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we developed the training program in 2016 and identified the gaps that were in the training programs back then. And there's a lot of great training programs. I'm not putting down any other training program. I was just very fortunate to be able to develop my own and make the changes that I wanted to make and not be working for somebody else. So with the gaps, it was the mentoring after the programs. So a lot of times it was, here you go, you take a weekend program and then you're done. They wash their hands and they say, have a good career. We wanted to make sure that people realized that they were part of a community, a safe, injection community. And we highly encourage mentoring afterwards. There is no way that you are going to do a weekend course and expect to hang up your shingle and have people come in and get their injections done by you. It all comes from experience. And you want to be able to, do that mentoring and that experience in a safe environment. So we provide, clinic space and things like that for people to do their trainings and continue to do that mentoring afterwards. The in-depth anatomy is huge, and that has become a huge component to all training companies now. Everybody realizes it. I was fortunate from the very start that I worked for a plastic surgeon, and we did a lot of facelifts and brow lifts and eyelid surgery. So I was already aware of the anatomy underneath the skin right from before I started doing aesthetics. And then the business component, huge, huge. I think that those are the three main components that we added that puts our training company apart. Also with the what we've decided, so we do have, they have to write a test afterwards to assess their knowledge of what they've learned virtually. They have a skills checklist that the trainers have to do, and making comments. We don't pass everybody. There may be somebody that they just don't get it, and they have to continue mentoring before we actually will give them the certificate that they've passed the course. Kind of reached out to the trainers last year and got a sense of how they felt the trainings were going and the different levels of education for the trainers. I think what's happened in the past, and so people see aesthetics as a very glamorous job, very glamorous, easy way to make money. You see on Instagram that people are in their BMWs and they've got their Louis Vuittons and things like that, and they think that it's an easy thing. So if you're not a nurse, you're going to take the path of least resistance to get into medicine so that you can be an injector, which is taking an LPN, a licensed practical nurse, or a RPN course, which is a diploma program. A little bit of a difference in education between a diploma program than there is with being a bachelor's prepared nurse or a master's prepared. So we were finding that a lot of people were doing that and asking to take our program just graduating from their LPN course because it's 18 months versus 3 years of university. So what we've decided is if somebody has just taken their LPN or their RPN course, they need at least 2 years of experience in nursing to have that foundational knowledge, learn how to have clinical judgment and reasoning before they can take a specialty, which our specialty would be aesthetic medicine. So we are not saying that LPNs are not qualified to be injectors. Absolutely they are, but not fresh out of their diploma program. So, and even with BSCN nurses that have taken a 3 to 4 year university program, as a team, we've decided that they need 6 months experience because you really have to have that judgment and the experience of working in a clinical environment in order to bring that to be a better nurse and be safer for patients. So that's what we've decided to do. And there was one program, so that's kind of the difference between the two programs. There is a association, I guess, or a college that provides the LPN program, and then they also provide the BSCN program. So I kind of compared the two, and because we don't want this to be just THMA, our personal opinion, we want it to be based on research. So the LPN program, 20 consecutive months, and it's 5 weeks of practicum, totaling 180 hours of clinical practice, whereas the BSCN is 1,700 practical hours of learning in class and 1,300 hours spent hands-on. So there's a huge difference between the two, which is why we say, yeah, you need to have clinical experience first, learning how to deal with patients, learning about scope of practice, learning aseptic technique, things like that are really, our trainers found a difference in the training aspect of new nurses versus ones that are experienced. So we are writing an article on it to support our decision. So in doing our research on it.
And it just leaks out of you that you want things to be science-based. It's not, as you said, not an opinion. It's based on fact and research. And I was thinking, as you're talking about, I was thinking about it, to be a pilot, you go to school to learn how to fly a plane. We have a college here right in my community that is just for you go to school for 3 years to learn to fly a plane. And you understand all that, but then you have to go and qualify for whatever type of plane you're going to fly. and you do that, you don't jump in the pilot seat. Okay, let's do this. You're working with with a more seasoned pilot in the other seat, and then eventually you're moving over, and there's this whole journey and you mentioned it earlier, and I was curious how this fits into this, because you need to be qualified on a particular jet, you need a certain amount of time in a certain seat with pilot or co-pilot, and but you're going to have somebody has shadowed you with that, somebody has worked with you. And how does, just in because you mentioned shadowing that lady that inquired about that, and so if somebody comes to get those clinical hours, what does that look like, having, because I would think that would be a huge plus to have somebody specifically that's coming alongside you in your journey of those 2 years. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And the 2 years that we're talking about would be more, working in the hospital and things like that. But it is important, like an apprenticeship.
Yeah.
And some of the clinical trainers have identified nurses that just don't have the proper skills. And that's where they would suggest, you need to come and you need to mentor with me on a certain amount of times before we're actually comfortable for you to be out injecting patients on your own. There's a couple of clinics that will offer bridging clinics. So the nurse practitioner will oversee that person coming in, and they're bringing their patients in, but it's a nice, safe environment where they can ask questions, and they're not on their own. So they're not, and some people will set up a clinic in their home, which is fine as long as it's meeting the practice standards and guidelines of the public health. But then they're on their own. So I think that would be really tough if you're not comfortable. Now, if you've got nursing experience, and it makes it an easier transition, I think, to go into medical aesthetics.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, my daughter is graduated 4 years ago. So now as a nurse, and she worked in emergency for a while. Now she's working with helping people transition from the hospital into other care. But it's fascinating, just how much she didn't realize she knew from that education until it was put to the test, until she was in an environment. And I think that's it's like putting the vessel under pressure. You can't find the leak in a tire until you put it under the water, and then there it is. And just finding those gaps. And then we all have gaps, and you pointed out, you recognized there was a gap in education and training, and you went ahead and filled it, but you had to find that gap. And I think what I'm hearing you say is it's so important to have somebody come alongside you in having some structured training, but also coaching alongside of you, so that if there is a gap, you can find it and you can fill it to be the best version of you as an injector, or whatever language you use to support that. Listen, let's jump into a question. We talked a bit about safety guidelines and professional standards, and that's clearly, from what I've heard today, it certainly has been an evolving journey from nothing to something. But you've played a key role in developing safety guidelines and professional standards for aesthetic nurses. I thought that was intriguing when you said they weren't allowed in a room with the doctors. Boy, things have changed. What are the biggest challenges you see in ensuring patient safety in this industry?
Yeah, I think there would be three that I identified, and one, social media has been a huge challenge. I tell, a lot of them saying, oh my, what would happen if Instagram went down? How are you going to get patients? And when we first started, we didn't even have a website. So, sort of securing patients and keeping patients and retaining patients was all based on your ability, your knowledge, how you treated the patient. They tell somebody else, So it was all, based on that. Whereas now it's social media. People think, and they do have to be on social media. Like there's no question, there is a lot of competition, and that is a great way to provide education to patients and to get your name out there. But I think the newer injectors are influenced by Instagram influencers and what they do, and that we have to be out there and think outside the box, and we need to be dancing, and we need to be doing all these things that really don't portray a good image of nursing. And they have to realize that anytime You're representing your college. So we're representing our, whether we're a nurse or a nurse practitioner, we've got standards to follow with that. And we've got the food and drug guidelines that we have to follow with how we promote, say, a neuromodulator. And when our name is on a social media post, which we have to have our name, our title, what our specialty is, so aesthetic medicine, we have to elevate our standards, our language, our presence. And I think that new injectors get lost in that because they just want to be out there. And we have a whole course that talks about social media and being education influencers and not Instagram influencers when you're looking at aesthetic medicine. There's a lot of false information out there on social media that is based on opinion and not on evidence-based. So we are really pushing them. If you're making a claim about a product or anything, add a reference at the bottom to show that it is evidence-based knowledge that you're posting on and not just opinion. So it's been a friend, and it hasn't done us a lot of favors, but it is changing, which is amazing that, we're finally realizing that nurses know that they can only, you can have a personal page and you can put whatever you want on your personal page and not tell anybody you're a nurse. But when you're, portraying yourself as a nurse, there's a certain, image that we have to uphold for the college. The other one is scope of practice, which really shouldn't be a challenge, but I think it is because if somebody hasn't worked in the hospital before, then they don't realize that there's certain rules and regulations that have to be followed. And if it's not taught in the training program, and they're only being taught how to inject, then they're having scope of practice issues. So as a LPN or an RPN or an RN, so I'm an RN, I can't diagnose and prescribe. So I can't have a patient come in and look at them and say, oh, yeah, you've got some frown lines and I'm going to do 30 units of Botox. I can't do that. I can't diagnose and prescribe. You need to have an authorized prescriber, so a nurse practitioner or a physician, to see the patient, to diagnose wrinkles or diagnose aging, and to prescribe the neuromodulator. So I did a professional development presentation on discipline decisions and went across Canada and pulled out some of the discipline decisions over the last couple of years. And pretty much all of them were nurses had their license suspended because of scope of practice issues. Most of them were diagnosing and prescribing. So you're practicing outside your scope. Can't do that. So it's something that we really try to, impress on people. And that professional development, that presentation went over really well because it's actual things that people are losing their license for. So we're trying to let them know what they can do and not do. And then the other one is just identifying and managing adverse events. So, the best injectors can have adverse events. I've had adverse events. I've probably had everything, not blindness, that can happen, but you learn from that. And being able to reach out to somebody if you did have something like that and not to sort of go, well, maybe that's not what it is. But I think the new injectors really need to be, able to identify them. And because of that, we do have a 3.5-hour adverse event virtual course. We teach it in our foundation program, but there's not enough time. So this is why we set up a separate course so that they can really understand and, sort of that differential diagnosis that they can do to see why this person's having this adverse event. So again, it's.
Actually, I love that you broke that. Listening to you, I'm thinking, so everything you keep talking about really is about cutting edge. So if you want you see you're constantly researching, constantly looking, constantly challenging, and I think that's just such a commendable approach to things. For anybody listening, I mean, it kind of says this is kind of without. I'm not here. I don't get any money for promoting Tracy, but I can tell you, if I was in this business, this would be somebody I'd want to talk to because clearly this is cutting edge. But I want to just touch base on the whole social media side of things. Our sponsor is Equa Marketing, who are actually specialists in aesthetic medicine marketing and promotion. What's interesting is that in this industry, and because of what you just talked about with scope of practice, what you can or can't do and what you can and cannot say, is that there's a way to promote your business professionally, and there's a way to promote it a promotional way. And so the difference is, how that looks in your Google ranking, your social media performance, your website effectiveness, branding strength, all those dimensions. That's what in fact, I'll be talking about that at the end of the podcast. That's something that's going to be available to you, but I'm not promoting that right now. What I'm just sharing with you is that there is arguably a right way and a wrong way to do it. The challenge is that you're probably not an expert in that, and you may understand the rules and regulations, but the technology that it's going to apply in, you probably are not an expert in. That's where Equa really comes in, because they've already seen all this stuff. So they know where the lines are and what can or can't be crossed. And I think it's just so important that in this business, you said scope of practice, I don't think we're really in a time where being a generalist is the right choice. I think it's really about focusing on what you really want to be great at. Clearly, Tracy, you've focused on research and education, informing and coaching and advocating for the industry and for people. I just encourage you kind of to think about the things that you need to probably bring in some expertise on, whether it be marketing, whether it be someone like Tracy in your training and the evolution of the practice itself. But that kind of leads me into a question sort of based on we never really know for sure who's listening, but I know that quite often we have folks that are new to the industry, looking at the industry or transitioning into it. So what advice would you give to new nurses or medical professionals looking to transition into the field of medical aesthetics?
Yeah. And it could be new. I just had somebody call me today that's just recently retired nurse who wants to get into aesthetics. So it is, it's a career option for both ends of the scale. I would say the first thing is that do not consider it a part-time job, because people, and when I do the virtual training, I'll say, who you are and where you came from and how why you decided to get into aesthetics. And if they say, it's just an easy way to make money and it's a part-time job and I'm just going to do it on the side. And I say, then this course isn't for you. Mm-hmm. Because it's a tough job, even though it looks like it's very glamorous. You talk to anybody that's in it, it is 24/7 when you're running your own business. You're responsible for everything. So I don't want people to see it as an easy way to make money. I'm just going to do it. It's going to be like, I'm going to be moonlighting. If you want to be successful and ethical and you're going to put your heart and soul into it. I would tell them also to do their background research. So look at their geographical area. Is there room for more injectors in that area? I think we've only tapped a small part of the market of people that want to do aesthetics, and neuromodulators and fillers. That's kind of it's still prominent, but more people are doing skincare, skin quality skincare, and that's something that they can build into their practice as well. So they should do their background research, and they should do a business plan even before they start, just to make sure that this is going to be a viable option for them. They have to set their vision and attainable goals, and I will help them do that even before they take the program, because we do have a presentation that talks about you finish your program. Now, what do you do? There's different options that you can take. Again, try to find a clinic or a colleague that you can shadow before you even take the course to see if this is what you like. You may go, I can't deal with those patients because they're a different set of patients. I would also tell them to read their provincial college guidelines, because they have practice statements on aesthetic nursing. And they're open to you don't have to be a member of the association to get that. And CNPS, which is our Canadian Nursing Protection Society, that's for a liability insurance. They have a whole section on cosmetic nursing. So kind of do a little bit of background research. They have to realize that more money is going to be spent after the program. So don't think you're going to put our program is $6,000 to take the foundation course. You need another $15,000 probably after that to get your liability insurance, your business insurance, association fees, mentoring. Mentoring's going to cost, or they're not going to get that for free. So mentoring, and then all of a sudden you have to buy products and medical supplies and everything. So there is a huge setup fee for somebody. And then try to find a group of peers, networking. That's probably the biggest thing, and the most important thing is finding a really nice supportive group of nurses that are positive about aesthetics, and learn from people that have made mistakes in the past, which would be myself. So I like to teach from experience and what to do and not to do, because I've been through it all.
Thank you. And if you haven't made mistakes, then I'm not sure what you've done. Life is a collection of that. I mean, it's sharpening a blade against an edge requires friction, but the blade doesn't start out sharp, and it takes that friction to get a sharp edge, and that's part of the journey. And you said something about it's not a part-time job. I love to say when it's something like, for me, I have a full-time passion for what I do, but I now have realistic right-size hours.
Yeah.
Right? Because I don't want to work 40, 60 hours a week. I don't arguably have to, but I have to right-size it. And to protect in my coaching, leadership coaching, it's about helping me, making sure that I'm prioritizing my investment in my family, my personal life, my businesses, as well as my community, and not shortchanging any of them. And one of the things I think, a lot of medical professionals are really accidental entrepreneurs. And so you don't have the business background, and you weren't taught it in school. That's not part of the curriculum. That's what Tracy's saying, is they offer that curriculum. It's so important. I focus heavily on communication, that looking at change and conflict as awesome things that are going to help propel and grow you and your business, rather than liabilities you should be afraid of and avoid. So there's so much to learn, but just not being overwhelmed. I love the way Tracy just broke it down there. So just a couple of things to start thinking about. Great, thank you for putting some numbers in there. I think that's important. So, but with the kind of shifting gears with the evolution of aesthetic treatments, I think I've been a lot of podcasts. I've heard a lot of different things going on, and as an outsider looking in, it's quite interesting from my perspective, and it's fascinating in some respects. But with rapid evolution of aesthetic treatments and technologies, like, how do you stay ahead and ensure your training programs remain cutting edge? And I think it feels like me, and sorting the weed out from the chaff.
Yeah. I mean, there is, because we talk about this a lot with experienced providers, that we see something on social media and we go, well, that doesn't make sense. So we kind of collaborate together going, yeah, well, let's do some research on it to see, no, that doesn't make it. So then we have to disseminate it to the newer injectors, going, do not try that procedure. So there is a lot of stuff where you have to use your critical thinking skills, and you really have to analyze the even literature that's written by KOLs. You kind of look at it and you go, you really have to look at things and collaborate with others. But the things that sort of we've done through THMA in order to, stay ahead of the game. And I do tell them, you're going to be spending your time developing your practice. So we will do all the research, and then we will disseminate it to you. So when there's a new clinical article or anything like that comes out, I have a private Facebook page that's set up for THMA members, and I will put the clinical articles in there, so that they have access to them. With that private Facebook page, it's all about networking. There is chat groups in there, and it's great to see all the chatter going back and forth. And it's all very positive, and that's what we want, and then they don't feel like they're alone. So we do have the private Facebook page. We also have professional development presentations that started during COVID. So every Wednesday night from 8 until 9 p.m., we have presentations, industry. Could be, I'm doing one tomorrow night on botulinum toxin complications. And it's open to, it's free. So they don't have to pay for any of that. And then the recordings are placed on our Facebook page. So a lot of comments come out from after those that give us insight as to, oh, I never thought about that question before. And then I'll start doing more research on it. We do regional networking workshops as well. So it's getting a group of maybe 10 to 12 nurses on a Sunday afternoon, sponsored by industry that pays for all the product that's being used. And we give some high level education lectures, and then we do injections, sort of on each other, or you could bring in a model. So again, it's that small networking ability for new nurses to be able to try injection techniques that they don't want to try on their own. So we're pretty heavy in Halifax and Ottawa, and then it's expanding out beyond that. And then we have regional symposiums. So I've been doing this in Thornhill, which is where I lived. We had them for 8 years, where it's just a day of educating. So it doesn't cost a lot to go to it because a lot of these are new injectors and they don't have a lot of disposable cash. So we make it very affordable. So we've had Thornhill, then lately we've done Markham. We have one in Winnipeg coming up next month. And then we have one in Toronto and we have one in Halifax. The one in Halifax, because that's where I live, has grown and grown. And now we're at the convention center. We've got 15 exhibitors. We've got a cadaver lab. So it's mainly because of demand. So if the nurses are demanding more education and there's certain things that they want, then I can build it because it's my company. That's the beauty of it. So sort of looking at what people need and then going from there. This is probably the most exciting part that has happened with THMA is that we now have a clinical research committee, which I think we're the only training company that has gone to that level of commitment. And the director is Jen Splain. So she's doing her PhD through Dalhousie University. So she's the one that said, we need to do this. And I said, absolutely. I was the editor of a journal in the US for 8 years. So it's not anything new to me to be writing articles. But we now have a whole committee for it. And we've got nurses that have never written before that we're encouraging them and helping them to write articles. We've got one coming out in the next month that's on infection prevention in aesthetic medicine. We have one on social media that needs an REB. We have what motivates people to get into aesthetics has to do with a survey. We have to get an ethics board approval on that one. And then we have the one on elevating the education for training companies, which is what we talked about earlier. We'll have an article to support our decision on that. So I'm super pumped by having a research committee.
That's very cool. Yeah,
it is very cool.
We have another great place to build networking communities is to be on these different podcasts are where we offer some webinars. Again, if you go to businessofesthetics.org, you'll find there's actually be a webinar there that you'll find that Tracy's been on a few of those as well. So like there's just great knowledge out there. You just need to go and spend a little time. And all of that is free. And it opens up opportunities for you to create network and mentorship opportunities as well. But our time is coming to an end, Tracy. Yes. So I'm going to, what is the best way for people to reach out directly to you, your website?
Yeah, through my website, which is THMAconsulting.com. Also, my phone number, no problem, 416-822-5349. I have my cell with me all the time. I have people reaching out, like providers reaching out all the time and asking questions. But in my email, which is training@thmaconsulting.com.
So TMHA consulting
THMA.
.com. You're also on LinkedIn.
Also on
So you
LinkedIn.
reach you there.
Yeah.
And again, thank you for joining us today and sharing your expertise on shaping the future of aesthetic nursing, training, safety, and industry standards. I think we have covered all the bases tonight. That's awesome. Your insights into how clinics can enhance patient outcomes while increasing profitability were incredibly valuable. We certainly appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. I also want to take a moment to thank all of our amazing listeners. We appreciate each and every one of you, and we appreciate the privilege of your time, and we couldn't do what we do without your support. If you did enjoy today's episode, please share it with your colleagues and friends on social media. Help us spread knowledge within the aesthetics community. Also, please don't forget to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps other doctors and practice owners discover our podcast and gain valuable insights to grow their businesses as well. And a special thank you before we go to Equa Marketing. I mentioned them earlier, who are the sponsor of this episode. As I mentioned, they have over 20 years of experience in digital marketing for aesthetic practices. Equa, as I mentioned, is offering you as listeners a complimentary digital marketing consultation, which includes a custom 12-month strategy tailored to your practice. Now, if you are an expert in marketing and you have all the customers you ever want, or you've got it all figured out, which is, there are lots of folks that do, and that's really awesome. That's their thing. If it's not, this is a great opportunity for you just to get ahead of the game, get ahead of the curve. The feedback I have heard has been incredible from people saying how it's helped them. Again, there is no cost to it. You can reach out through businessofesthetics.org/MSM, Michael S. Michael, and you can book your consultation. And two questions I just have to throw up. It's like, the first question is, what's at risk to do this? To take this this time for that is just time. There's no cost. There's no hooks or tricks. Equa Marketing is a highly regarded industry expert. The second question is, what's at risk not to do this? Well, again, if you're not an expert and you are looking to grow the business, or you're looking to better understand how to professionally market your organization, then this has got to be something that's worthwhile for you. So until next time, keep striving for excellence, elevating patient care, and making a lasting impact in your industry. And on behalf of Tracy, wishing all of you an amazing week ahead. Thanks, Tracy.
Great. Thank you.